It's January 11th, 2001. Just want to open the meeting to reflect on the tragedy in Tucson this last weekend and just take a moment of silence as we think of everyone whose lives were drastically changed in this senseless violence. Thank you very much. We want to welcome our new city clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to also welcome our city attorney and our legislative analysts all here this morning. I know some others will be coming, so we're going to start and hold Record Parks to give the opportunity of some of the public to come as well. Item number 1 will hold for a moment. Okay. But item number 2, is someone here from Record Parks for item number 2?
Item number 2 is the City Administrative Officer report relative to an agreement with Edward Sunseri Jr. doing business as Sunseries for the operation of a bar and beverage services concession for various Department of Recreation and Parks facilities. This item is also scheduled for council on Friday, January the 14th.
Good morning, Veronica Salumbides with the Office of the CAO. The proposed agreement is for a term of 5 years with 2 5-year renewal options. Under the terms of the proposed agreement, the concessionaire will have the exclusive right to provide liquor and beverage services at the Friendship Auditorium, Gray Simmons Lodge, Ramona Hall, Orcutt Ranch, Cabrillo Beach Bathhouse, Griffith Park Visitor Auditorium, and the Waddles Mansion. The department will have the right to add or remove facilities during the term of the contract. The concessionaire will pay the city 20% of gross receipts from bar and beverage sales. The concessionaire will also pay the city 1.5% of gross sales for utilities. Revenues from the concession will be deposited into the Department of Recreation and Parks Operating Fund, 90% of it. 10% will be deposited into the concessions improvement account. There is no impact on the general fund. The CAO recommends approval.
Any questions? Yes. Mr. Reyes.
This is more, as we deal with community issues and as we deal with folks who want clarity as to access to alcohol in the recreational facilities. If I'm asked the question, does this mean that there is another liquor license in the neighborhood? How do we answer that?
Well, currently the concessionaire has a roving liquor license for that specific event only.
Can you say that one more time? I didn't quite.
Ron Morales Recreation and Parks. Currently, the concessionaire operating this concession, they have what's called a roving liquor license where they can provide alcohol for a certain time, just as this event.
Now, this is for beer and wine only, or beer, wine, and hard liquor?
It's beer, wine, and hard liquor.
Both, all three?
Yes.
And so it's a roving license that is shared or is applicable to the different facilities throughout the city?
Yes, for certain times, just for special events.
Okay, so can we have those conditions so that if we do get asked how long liquor will be served, we have an answer?
Yes.
Does it differ from site to site?
Yes, generally it's on the weekends. It's primarily in the evening. It's approximately about 4 hours. Part of the condition on here is they have supervision. We have staff supervising and monitoring the activities. The main purpose of having an agreement, instead of allowing the patrons to bring in alcoholic beverages, is to provide better monitoring and better services. Great.
Now, I'll give you an example. We have the Audubon Center, which we have, it's a successful facility. It's a green building. I mean, it has all the bells and whistles. And they are looking to use their center to see how we can work with different opportunities. A lot of folks always come up and say, can I have my wedding here? Can I have my quinceañera here? Can I have this and that? Would they be allowed to work with you in creating those environments for those types of festivities so they could have revenue generating opportunities?
Vicki Israel, Assistant General Manager for Recreation and Parks. Councilman, if I may address this, is that the Audubon Society is different because it's not operated by Recreation and Parks. However, the Audubon Society can meet with us regarding the partnership division and to come into an agreement on whether or not they can use alcohol. But they would have to follow the same guidelines that all of our rental facilities do, which is, you know, strictly on a permit basis, and that security must be at the site.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Just a technical question. Has this been in place previously?
For years, it's just that we're asking for an additional contracts because the need
Like
is
for how
there.
many years?
Oh, I think we've been,
It's
years.
oh.
Oh, I think we've been serving alcohol on a permit basis at Grace Simons and Friendship Orchid for probably 25 years.
I got that. Do you need any planning approval for this? Like a BZA approval? I know there's no BZA anymore, but do they need any approval? As if, when we had the discussion, I'm just thinking up at the observatory, there's a discussion where they got beer or wine, and it was taken off the table. On this particular case here, do you have to get any approval from the planning department to serve alcohol at these facilities?
No, because it's on a as-needed basis, where at the observatory was on a daily basis.
I got that. And then the other complaint that I did have, that someone had an event there, they said they couldn't bring their own water in. They wanted to bring plastic bottles of water.
At the observatory?
No, at one of the locations that you
Okay.
have here. So what is their requirements there? If I'm having a dance party there, and I wanted to give people free water, and I bring in 3 cases of whatever water is, and promise to recycle every bottle that's there, I can't do that?
It's what's written in the agreement. If the contractor is responsible for all food, for all beverages.
Okay, I think water should be exempt, because water's healthy and it's something. So, before this comes to council, could you check to see if you could exempt that? Can we change that at all, Madam City Attorney?
My understanding is that they've already negotiated the terms of an agreement, and if the agreement provides for all beverages, that would include water. That
But
would
it-
be part of the profit that the vendor would be making.
I understand that, but is water a beverage? Water give you free when you go to a restaurant, so
Bottled water.
bottled water or whatever. I just feel kind of, it's important, you know, if someone, I don't know. So, why don't you talk to who is, I don't know these people who operate. How do we go from here, Vicki?
We'll definitely take it back to the concessionaire.
Yeah, just say if someone chooses to bring away their old water and give it away free, that should not be a problem, because I don't think we should be charging for water, you know, in that sense. So I say the same thing to the airport. I'm not just picking on you. I don't like when they charge $4 or $5 for a bottle of water out at the airport, especially after you bought one on this side of the line, and then you get on that side, you got to throw it out, so. All right, Mr. Reyes, you okay with going forward with this?
Yes.
Please have that answered by a council, or better yet, probably contact me before, just to let me know that spectrum, and it's also, you could consult with the city attorney on that issue of, is it okay if people bring free water in?
Mr. Chair, but I would like to request if, when there are events in our respective districts, that we are just informed of the hours that our liquor is being allowed, or just make us aware of
Right.
an event happening, just that we know that it's being allowed and have an understanding of what's going on in our own backyards. I appreciate that very much.
And do we have these events past midnight at places? Do they go past midnight?
I believe at Friendship Auditorium on occasion, yes.
Okay, past 1 o'clock?
I do not believe so.
Okay, we should try to have a fine that, because I learned long ago, once, this is a story about after midnight. It's a chapter in a book. Thank you very much. We're on to council, but please have that answered by the 14th. Thank you so much. That's item number 2, recommend approval.
Yes.
Okay, next item. This is yours, right?
Councilmember, are we proceeding to item number 1 or?
No, number 3.
Okay. Item number 3 is a city administrative officer report relative to the proposed amendment to the agreement between the Department of Recreation and Parks and the Heart of Los Angeles Youth, Inc., otherwise known as OLA, in connection with the Lafayette Park Multipurpose Center.
Good morning, Veronica Salumbidas with the Office of the CAO. Just a little bit of background. In 2007, the department executed a 25-year memorandum of agreement authorizing OLA to offer and administer programs at Lafayette Park. The proposed amendment would allow OLA to, for 10 years, place the Los Angeles Lakers name and logo at the center court at the Lafayette Multipurpose Center, to recognize a $250,000 grant from the Los Angeles Lakers. The grant will be used for the administration and operation of youth basketball programs at the Lafayette Multipurpose Center. The logo and will be installed at no cost to the city. There is no impact on the general fund. Therefore, the city financial policies are not applicable.
Any questions?
I just wanted to stress that the beneficiaries are both the children and families of both districts 10 and 1. All it tends to be, well, it's in my district with the centers and Councilmember Weston's district, so it's a unique partnership. But it's good to see this moving forward.
Yeah, Mr. Garcetti's right in there, and I'm a block away too, so it covers
Great.
everybody. Forthwith on this one. Thank you. Recommend approval. And then, could we take 4, 5, and 6 somewhat in order, because I think that's similar, all things right now, for the business of recreation and parks. Item number 4.
Item number 4 is the city administrative officer report relative to a proposed amendment to contract number 2934 between the Department of Recreation and Parks and Frank R. Webb Architects, Inc., for as-needed architectural design services.
Veronica Salumbidas with the Office of the CAO. The proposed amendment would extend the term of the architectural design services contract by 3 years, from 11 years to 14 years through February 16, 2014. It would also increase the compensation amount by $300,000 from $1.2 million to $1.5 million. The Department of Recreation and Parks requires the services of the consultant for several department projects, including Echo Park Pool Building renovation, Echo Park Recreation Center lower floor renovation, the Hanson Dam Ranger Station, and trail improvements. Funding for the fees paid under the terms of the contract is provided within each project budget. There is no additional impact on the general fund.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scholl is the Director of Planning in and for the Recreation and Parks Department. Anything to add?
No, other than the contracts are needed mainly to finish ongoing projects.
Ongoing, and Mr. Drucker,
Similar.
thank you very much. Mr. Reyes, any comments? Great job. Okay, great job. Keep moving on. Recommend approval. Next item.
Item number 5 is a city administrative officer report relative to a proposed amendment to supplemental agreement to contract number 3036 between the Department of Recreation and Parks and Land Images for as-needed landscape architectural design services.
Veronica Salumbidas with the Office of the CAO. The proposed amendment to the supplemental agreement would extend the term by 1 year, from 11 years to 12 years, and increase the compensation amount by $200,000 from $1.1 million to $1.3 million. The department requires the services of the consultant for several department projects, including the Griffith Park Crystal Springs Ball Field and the Sepulveda Basin Sports Complex. Funding for the fees, again, are provided within each project budget. There is no additional impact on the general fund.
Mr. Scholl?
The same applies, basically to finish ongoing projects.
All right. Any comments? The only comment I have, there's still a community process I want to go through on the Crystal Springs to make sure there's support from the community on that, so I don't want it just a done deal. Thank you. Next item, please recommend approval on that.
Item number 6 is a city administrative officer report relative to a proposed supplemental agreement to contract number 2649 with Canner Architects for as-needed architectural design services.
Veronica Salumbiras with the Office of the CAO. The proposed agreement would extend the term by 1 year from 15 years to 16 years and increase the compensation amount by $100,000 from $1.3 million to $1.4 million. The consultant is needed for projects such as the Lafayette Recreation Center. The consultant is also needed to help to ensure compliance with the city policy on the leadership in energy and environmental design building rating system. That system was created by the Green Building Council to measure sustainability and building performance. Again, funding for the fees is provided within each project budget. There is no additional impact on the general fund.
And Mr. Shaw, Mr. Drucker?
Yes, and we would ask that it go forthwith as the contract's expired and the Lafayette project is about 98% complete, and we want to get the architect back working again.
Very good. Mr. Reyes? Okay, thank you very much. So move forth on all those. When are they going to be in council, Mr. Clerk? You know when they're in council?
When is this going to be?
This has not been scheduled for council yet.
Okay, we could schedule it whenever it is. Good. Let me just get you one item there from, the next item is on aging. James, do you want to come up and handle it?
Item number 7 is the Department of Aging report relative to a proposed amendment to an agreement with the California Department of Aging and the acceptance of an additional Medicare Improvements for Patients and Providers Act grant award for beneficiary outreach and assistance.
Good morning, James Dunn, Department of Aging. This is a request from the department for approval to accept a grant amendment to our MIPA grant. The increase is the additional $1,870. Our request also includes rollover of $36,817 from last fiscal year into the current fiscal year so that we can complete our services.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Reyes, any questions? So ordered on that. And lastly, number 9. Anyone here for number 9? Call number 9, will you please, Mr. Clerk?
Item number 9 is a communication from the County of Los Angeles Department of Auditor Controller relative to quarterly accountability of funds reports for the Olive View Medical Center for fiscal year 2009-10 and for the first quarter of fiscal year 2010-11.
And we're going to recommend a receive and file in as much as these reports are for the intention of information only. Okay, so that covers all of that. And now there's a couple of things that we have before us, Mr. Reyes. Item number 8, which we'll call after item number 1. We're going to call item number 1 first. We do have one speaker's card before I call from the Parks Department. Jason, Elias.
Item number 1 is the Department of Recreation and Parks verbal briefing relative to a reorganization of the department. This is a discussion item only.
Good morning, council members. Jason Elias, Service Employees International Union, Local 721. As you know, we represent maintenance employees, both part-time and full-time in Rec and Parks, as well as throughout the city. We're going to hear from the department regarding the reorganization of the department, and some of the moves we fully support. There is one caveat, I think, with before hearing from the department, there's one caveat, which is the fact that we are looking to shrink the labor, the large bulk of labor, rank and file labor in the department by something upwards of 200 employees, while growing management in the department. I think the number is something like 8. So while we understand that supervision is definitely needed in the department, if you're shrinking your labor force by about 200, 250, growing management does not seem to be symbolically, or I think symbolically or in reality, the right move to make. I do want to hear from the department in regards to the reorganization, and I'm sure there are some explanation for that, but I just do want to point you in that direction, cause for concern.
Thank you very much. Do you ever get free parking in a meter zone? You ever pull in and there's money in the meter and it doesn't go out? And
Do I?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I always put
Well,
money in.
today in this committee, because the clock didn't start, you got free parking, so I'll call you again after the comments if you'd like, because the clock didn't run.
I love that.
Okay, good.
I
Thank you.
absolutely
You're a
love
lucky
that,
day today.
Councilmember.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
good. Okay, Mr. Muckery and team, Mr. Sanders, the President of the Recreation and Parks Commission, Mr. John Muckery, the General Manager of the Department of Recreation and Parks, Regina Adams, Executive Officer and team. Mr. Reyes and I we chat often about our youth and what parks mean, and you know how we both feel strongly about parks. And we know how strongly you feel. It's not a pleasant moment to begin these discussions of the critical challenges that we face. But we'd like to hear from you, and also, as we've talked, Mr. Muckery, Mr. Sanders, I think all my colleagues need to hear, our colleagues need to hear, because you're an important component of our community, and we would like to hear what you think is the steps we've got to take in order to survive this very difficult fiscal climate.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Reyes, it's an honor and a privilege to have the chance to chat with you today about this rather dramatic matter involving the organization of our department. I know this is listed just as a discussion item, but we of course do solicit your advice as well as your support for what it is we're undertaking. The environment that defines the challenge to which we're responding is one that you're just referred to, and that has been growing with us for the last 3 or 4 years, and could have been anticipated even before that. Compared to 4 years ago, we're at more than 1/3 less funding and more than 1/3 fewer employees in the department. At the same time, we have grown substantially in acreage and number of parks for which we're responsible, which is a wonderful thing, the growth. The shrinkage is not a wonderful thing, and we do see this as a part of the economic crisis the entire nation faces, but we also see that there's, over the longest term, going to be no return to the status quo ante. So that it is critically important that we start to find ways to manage and operate the great asset that is our park system in a different way from the way it had been operated before. And our management under Mr. Muckery's leadership began looking at that 3 years ago. Independent needs assessment, which was done under contract for the department, drew as one of its critical conclusions when its final report was filed in 2009 that the expansion of partners and actively managing the relationship by key senior leaders of the organization, that is the partner relationship, is a critical component of strategic direction. The direction from our commission, from the beginning of the financial strains that we've been facing to our management, has been that whatever reductions there are in the financial assets available to us, management's direction is to find ways to provide as much service to the public as possible. We must minimize the impact on the public of what is the inevitable and continuing, I must say, into next year and perhaps the year after, shrinkage of our assets. The way to do that is to look to an organized, systematic, and thoroughgoing way to engage partners with us. We have picked up over 300 partners in an ad hoc way over the years. Some perform superbly, some not so superbly. These are management challenge. It requires management personnel, I might add, to match that management challenge. Now we're looking to do these things in a systematic, organized way to greatly expand what can be done in a public-private way. And we don't mean in a manner that is simply a facade. We're not talking about an office of partnerships down the corridor, 3 or 4 people typing away. We're talking about a thoroughgoing reorientation of the department. So, Mr. Muckery, I'd like to ask you to describe what it is that you're putting into place and the way you went about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commission President. And I want to thank Barry for his leadership and understanding. As you know, he is a citizen leader. He does not get paid. He's been actively helping us through a lot of sources on it. As my president said, about 3 years ago, we set on a 5 key goals. One goal was to add more parkland, and that should be a future discussion because we have done that. And it's the tale that we need told by all of you. The second thing was, as we knew the budget was shrinking, we knew we had to reorganize. And we knew we had to shrink our management team. The EREP, Early Retirement Incentive Program, we lost over 200 managers, and those were leaders. Our entire budget right now for management is about 3% of our budget goes to management and senior management. 97% goes to labor. So we set about trying to figure out what is the best way to take our function and figure out to streamline it, get rid of the bureaucracy, find other funding sources. So we came upon an area of focusing on recreation, of course, and partnerships, and then advanced planning. Each one of those are key to our department, and through the shrinkage, we've been able to gain a lot more flexibility, primarily in how we do maintenance and construction. You should know that we get reimbursement now for the majority of our employees from Prop K, Prop 40, and the other props, Quimby. And so we are actually bringing money that we used to pay on contract to contract people. We're bringing it in-house. We're going to do more of that. Commissioner President Sanders talked about partnerships. As we go forward, we have to have one dedicated group that does nothing but look external to this department and bring in real partners. OLA is one of those examples that we started working with about 5 years ago. But there's fertile ground out there, and as we bring in partners, we can offset our direct costs and indirect costs to put on programming while retaining our employees. There is no move afoot as we bring in partners to then jeopardize the employment of our employees. Just the opposite. We want to expand what we do and how we do it. I'm going to turn it over to Regina because one of the questions that came up is what we do need. The union rep came in and talked about expanding management. These are positions we've had in the department for a long time. I've chose not to fill them. Councilmember LeBon, do you remember the big discussion we had over as superintendent for Griffith Park? You fought hard to get that position. In a normal environment where funding were not an issue, I would have filled that position because it's necessary. Not only did I hold that one vacant, I got rid of 2 superintendents throughout this process. Highly paid employees, necessary for normal operation, but as we go forward, we're looking at filling only those key positions that mirror the new organization. So, Regina, if you want to talk about specifics or if you want to have a discussion, we're open at this time.
I have a couple of questions.
Couple of questions for Mr. Reyes.
Just some basic, rather dramatic, though, changes as proposed. When we look at the Operations East, I guess the first page we have 812 under Vic Israel. Then we have the Partnership Division, and that shrinks to 83. And Kevin Regan, we have Operations West 747, Operations Division 505. So I notice there seems to be a geographic change or how you are entitling. I'm trying to understand how that change occurs and how does it impact the level of service or quality of service. I just want to get those numbers are pretty dramatic, and then I just want to get a feel for what that means.
Okay,
And just to add to that too, John, if you go back to when things were very good, where you did have AGMs, and then you did have a superintendents, where there was more of a closer level there, because that was like 7 top managers, now you're reduced to 2, if I have it right.
You're correct. And Councilmember Reyes, you should understand that we went from about 2,200 positions, full-time positions, we're down to about 1,500 right now today. And that's gone over the last 3 years. Part-time employees at the high water mark, we had over 8,000 people on the payroll. We're down to about 4,000. So in the last 3 years, we've taken tremendous cuts in people. Your question is more on equity. And you should know in this year's budget, we're taking 10 of the more affluent centers completely off the grid. They're going to become self-sufficient through their fee structure. We've talked to the community, we've talked to our staff, they know they can do that. We're now shifting the appropriated dollars that we have into those areas that we know are the greatest need, where there are no YMCAs, where there are no boys clubs, where there is no AYSO. We've mapped these out over the last 3 years. So your question is, is everybody across the 15 council districts being shared the same? The answer is no. Because there are areas that can absorb this, and we are working with the community to do that. We are going to shift those dollars into the inner cities, into East LA, where we know they're needed the most. Councilmember LeBon's talked about embedding in this organization, we have various levels of supervision. We've reduced that tremendously. And I supported the ERIP. I was one of the few general managers that did. I would support it today because we had to do something to reduce our payroll budget across the board. But what we're proposing in here is to reduce that bureaucracy while pushing the emphasis on those areas of greatest need. And I know my commission president supports that. I know the mayor's office supports this, and we will continue to do this. I cannot make any promises going forward that we won't have to then burden some of these areas. As you know, this year, my department, as part of the P3 shortfall, has asked to almost take $3 million in cuts. That's this current fiscal year. Next year, I don't even know what it's going to be. So, but I'm going to tell you, just on this organization, we are putting the emphasis in those areas where we should be putting it in.
Gotcha.
Somebody opened a discussion. We are embedded in the community. We should reflect the norms of that community. Our rec centers are the community and cultural crossroads, and we will continue to do that. But again, I want to stress, Regina and her staff, we're taking 10 centers. We're not putting any direct appropriated money into those centers.
Right. I just have a couple more questions. Maybe in the response, it can be folded in or responded to one way or another. But in light of the organization, then where do you intend to place any of the child care programs? How do we see the child care programs in the future so that we have a greater understanding of that direction? I know those were questions we had in the past, and we're still trying to get some traction on how we respond. And I believe we're still waiting for some products, but now that we're going through this process, how are we more efficient with our time?
As it pertains to child care, we had to make a tough choice. Unlicensed child care, we had to remove that off of our appropriations. Was it critical? Is it critical to the community? Did we want to do that? No. The answer is no. We did not want to do it. We feel it's a critical program. Working with our staff, we developed other service delivery models, and we were able to absorb, I'm not going to say 100%, but the majority of those users from licensed child care into existing programs. We still use those facilities. We still use those buildings. We still staff them with rec and parks. And so the only thing that changed was the term licensed child care. You need to understand why we had to make that decision. Licensed child care, state licensed child care, started as part of the Latchkey program. That Latchkey program came with state subsidies directly to this department. Those subsidies are no longer there.
Right.
So it's not just our budget that's impacting our decision making, but it's the state's budget,
right.
Just like we're looking today at what does this real budget really mean going forward.
Right, and that's probably true for most of the city when we adopted federal and state programs and find ourselves in this position. So I understand that predicament. Last question really is about some fundamental issues. I recall when we took that walk in Lincoln Park, and it was a very insightful walk in terms of how we see change occur. But what struck me was the notion of accountability and responsiveness in the organization. And it came to the issue of maintenance, how park directors would be asking for certain improvements. There's some areas that needed immediate attention. They'd ask the maintenance staff, but the maintenance staff did not respond to the park director. They responded to their own management, senior management, and they had their own time frames. So there was a disconnect, it seemed. When you stepped in the picture and your staff, things changed dramatically. There was responsiveness. We saw results. Some of the ugliness that was there went away. And obviously today the improvements are tremendous. But there's so many parks, and to me it seemed like a structural issue. So in the reorganization, are we going to address that level of communication? Does it begin to speak to the nature of that responsiveness when it comes to the maintenance crew doing what they do versus what the park director needs, given their daily routines and daily needs in operations?
I can assure you, under this organization, things can only get better. What I can assure you is I'm going to have the resources to do everything we want to do at that point in time. As a trustee in NRPA, I was talking to many park directors across the country to figure out what's the best service delivery model for maintenance. If you think about our liability, taking children that we supervise daily, our biggest liability is our parks and how we keep them safe. And what we've done under this is we've put under advanced planning all maintenance and construction. Thereby, now we've leveraged more employees in one area. What you can expect to see in the future is some small degradation in park maintenance, while we collate a lot more data for that park. So I may not send out a crew to fix one park light, but if I get 2 park lights, a leaking water fountain, etc., we'll send in a whole team, and that's what you basically saw at Lincoln Park. Right. It's like doing the home remodel all at once instead of going there and fixing one thing at a time. We are going to be limited by our number of our employees. Now, what we are doing is we're reaching out on 501s. LA Conservation Corps is one of them. Trying to figure out a way where we can bring in their youth to do basic services. And we'll continue to do that. Again, we're not looking to displace employees. These employees are gone. We supported the ERIP. They're retiring now. You have not heard me come in the last 3 years and request a brand new position. I get it. This department gets it. What we have asked for in this thing are key positions we're now going to need to resurrect. They've been in our budget before. But to get to your question of maintenance, maintenance is going to be our number one priority as we go forward.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that, Mr. Reyes' question. Mr. Sanders said it's not just this summer we got a problem, it's several years ahead. But Mr. Reyes' point is this, and I would like it, I think there should be an evolution, I'm looking at your other managers as well, in studying sites where you define a local rec center to a regional rec center. And look at that regional rec center, like a Lincoln Park, like a Pan Pacific Park, like a Sepulveda Basin, that may have a little more structure for that local site manager, that previously there was a superintendent who could deal with that. But that's your job, John, but it's just something to think about.
Correct.
And I appreciate your work on the national level as a volunteer on that. What are some of the best practices across the country?
You know, I'm not just blowing my own horn, I'm blowing this department horns. We are the leader. When you go
It's
a
a
water
violation of 187521 to blow your horn in a park unnecessarily.
Well, it's not amplified horn, it's an air horn. But we are lending best practices. People come to us all the time, both on the national and international front. And people like Mike Scholl and his staff and Ramon Barajas, they don't get enough credit. What we're doing in water conservation, energy conservation, is one of the number one priorities of NRPA right now, and they're using our book. It's what we developed over the last 3 years. And so best practices are, right now, it's, I hate to say it, it's bailing out the lifeboat right now. Everybody in every municipal government is facing the same issues. What are core functions? How do we maintain core functions? And then how do we do everything else? I will say this, we've never really looked at rec and parks because of its title as a key component of public safety. We never really put a dollar figure to that. And my fear as we continue to make these cuts, and I've been meeting with Ray Cortines, Superintendent Cortines, to figure out what the schools are doing, both on their number of weeks, their hours, and after-school deliveries, because my fear is there will be no place for these young kids to go. And that's why we're putting the effort under this reorganization to focus on service delivery rather than maintaining just the status quo.
Can I add to that, just a brief paragraph from a letter to me dated December 7th, that was past December 7th. Dear Commission President Barry Sanders, Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, together with Fairmount Park Conservancy and the Philadelphia Commission on Parks and Recreation, are collaborating on a revenue enhancement study for the Fairmount Park system in Philadelphia. The Commission and Advisory Board focused on recommending policies relating to land use protocols, revenue enhancements, and marketing is conducting an external scan of Parks and Recreation public-private affiliate partnerships. The purpose of the research is to identify unique and new ideas that could be a model for Philadelphia. On behalf of the Commission, I'm writing to ask you for assistance with this work.
Right. You mentioned the Conservancy. You have a foundation now, which is just starting its area there. You have park advisories. Have they been notified of this change, or how are we rolling this out?
We first need to go through our legislative process. Mayor's directive requires us to get his approval and then go through this. But our plan is to go out to the communities, to our union partners, and get their support, broad support for this. And we know going forward, it's going to be even more difficult. Again, focusing on service delivery. And Kevin and Vicki on the recreation side, I really don't know how they've done it over the last 3 years, providing the service that we did. We made a promise this current fiscal year, we would maintain the summer programs at a level consistent with what we've done before, just because the budget came so late in the process. But we have absorbed almost $40 million in must-pays for utilities and labor.
Now, you mentioned utilities. I'm working, we had this big discussion about solar panels, and a lot of people came in, and I know some of the council members said, where's the DWP? It's been all their interest, and they were interested in certain parts of the city. I want, and I see our great assistant librarian here, I want the DWP, and I'm working with them now, to attack your roofs with solar energy so it could take that back off the grid and not charge you a bill. Now, does that make sense?
We've actually done that at a park.
One park, but you got 423 parks.
With DWP. The issue with DWP is, and I don't know if it's a legal issue within their organization or not, they are unwilling to give us credit for the excess generation power.
We'll have to work on that, because I think this is one thing that perplexes the people who we serve, is why are they getting these bills? They're not paying property tax. There's a transfer. I support the transfer. You support the transfer. Not all of our colleagues have our wisdom to support the transfer. But this is a way on the power issue that we could help and make a determination. And then your work, and I know Mr. Scholl's here, on the water issues of trying to use reclaimed water, etc. Partnerships are the key. And Miss Israel, who I've known for many, many years, is that person. And then the partnerships, too, extends to those who are, how would we say it, in the recreation business. You mentioned it. And when the 10 centers, give me an idea of what 10 are going to be off your...
Before we leave the subject of DWP, I don't want anybody in this room or listening, they are a strong partner of us.
I got it.
They support us 100%. It's just that one issue that we want to resolve.
Yeah, we're going to resolve that. On the 10, give me a couple of the parks so we have an idea. Any in Mr. Reyes's or my district?
Some of the parks we were just naming off were Peck Park, Bogdanovich, Pan
Peck
Pacific.
Park in the 15th district?
Mm-hmm.
Pan Pacific?
Yes.
Because of the number of activities there, they generate enough to, okay.
For the direct recreation support, program, they can become self-sufficient.
You mentioned Pan Pacific. I know there's a 500 women's softball that complements that, and it's scattered among many parks. Possibly they could become a partner, and other things as well. Okay. So I think the council would like some knowledge of that, and how maybe they could do that. I was thinking of North Hollywood Park, and I know they don't make Pontiacs anymore, right? We know that? and I'm just using this phrase so I'm not picking on anybody, but let's say North Hollywood Pontiac wanted to be a sponsor at North Hollywood Park. Vicki would come up with an idea of what the cost would be, and banners, which we have to get city attorney approval, possibly could be placed there to help show the partnership that is there. You mentioned the Unified School District. They've gone through a tough thing. I've had, and they're great people, real great people. The custodian at John Marshall High said, "Tom, you got to save me." And I said, "I can't save you. You're in an institution that's separate than ours," because he now is part of a team that goes to a number of schools as opposed to just one. We will see teams of skilled workers in maintenance go to a number of parks instead of just one. Is that correct?
Yes, we are, both on the maintenance side, you will see roving teams, and on the recreation side, you will see clustering, where a director at a large park will then have 2 satellite parks or 3 satellite parks.
Just for the sake here, that director at the large park, are they given any higher title, or recreation superintendent 2 or something that gives them some recognition?
Part of what we're requesting is to be able to give them bonuses.
Got it. Okay. I was thinking about trying to solve the problem today by canceling all bonuses to future time. So I want the CAO's office to look at that, to see what would that generate, at least through this bad storm that we're in right now.
Yes, this storm is bad, that we are forced to focus just what the charter mandates us to maintain from our property tax valuation.
Let me ask you another question. Hours of operations. And your needs assessment, Mr. Reyes, I think, would it be, are we still could we still have a presentation in this committee on the needs assessment at some time in the future?
Yeah, we'd love to do that.
Yeah.
At your convenience.
Go over, okay, that'd be good, Ms. Schechter, if you could schedule that. So, and also I think it would be good, and we've talked about it, maybe to go to some regions of the city, and I would like to invite, if you're face-to-face contact with your labor partners in this situation here, I think you should get them to the table, if that's the proper term to use, on some of these challenges so we know where everybody is.
Yeah, I want to dispel that. I work very well with labor. There will always be some disagreements, but their focus is on maintaining their quality workforce. That's my focus, and so there's no disagreement there. It's just how we implement these resources.
I got it, but there's a difficulty, I think, sometimes when you mix that with a community process that has a function in the community, they may not understand the intricacies of all the compacts that you have to abide by law.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there are issues that go right down, I'm using a word, the weed level. Let's go to community gardens. For 100 years, this department was not charged 1 penny for water.
Right.
Water is the number 1 cost at community gardens.
Right.
I don't have a choice but to pass on these costs that now were passed on by the mayor and council to the end users.
I got that, but also I think it was a previous mayor who wanted everybody to be business structured that got that DWP partnership broken that used to be there before, but we got to figure a way out of it. That's why I want to see the grid work. Mr. Reyes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, first, I can't tell you how appreciative I am, as not only as a council member, but as an individual who grew up in these neighborhoods, to see this notion of access continue, and the clear understanding that we are one city. It's not one area versus another. It's one city, and the solutions you're coming up with is about how we look at one city. But I think to underscore the intensity of this storm, if we can just summarize how much we've lost in revenue to operate the department, and how much you've raised internally with the hard work of Mr. Sanders and all the volunteers
Foundation
at a parallel level. Because just for the record and those who are listening, we kind of lose sight of just how deep this hole has become, and how much we've been able to climb out of it on our own. And I think it's important to hear it. I mean, I read the summary here, and it's fairly daunting, but I think if it came from you, yourselves, if we could just summarize that, I think it's significant to understand what we're wrestling with.
Yes, Councilmember, it's very difficult to look at our raw numbers and say, I don't see where you have a problem. But let me give an example. In the fiscal year 2006, My total budget from all sources was $162 million, which is a lot of money. There was $26 million in general fund appropriation. That came to equity dollars, that came to maintain public buildings, class parks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fiscal year 2011, my budget's $181 million. I now get $4 million from the general fund. The rest is all self-generated revenues. But in that $181 million, I have to come up with $40 million, approximately $40 million up front to pay for things that used to be funded by the general fund. So in real dollars, I'm $20 million short than I was 4 years ago. $20 million in real dollars, with COLAs and cost of material going up, I'm probably down to about 55 to 60% buying power where I was 4 years ago. And that's not looking at next year. Next year I know is going to be worse. So we may be at 50% level that we were 4 years ago in recreation parks.
And when I began as president of commission, there were 390 parks in the system. There are now 417, and we're looking for more, not less. Now's the moment to acquire land in this city. We can't let that moment pass. But the lower resources are being applied to a greater number of parks.
And the level of revenue that has come from the private side, if you will, can you speak to that?
Yes, well, I can't speak to all of the, there's private revenue coming in that is apart from the new LA Parks Foundation, but the LA Parks Foundation in the first year and a half or so of its operation raised well over $1 million, of which $700,000 has already been applied to projects. 100% of what it raises goes to the parks, and after it's, just operating, minimal operating expenses. No other purpose for this foundation, just as in the case of the Library Foundation and the Police Foundation. This amount of fundraising, I think, is significant as a startup, and as a startup in what is the worst fundraising environment since the fall of the Roman Empire. In the future years,
were you there?
I was there in my youth. In future years, it'll be substantial multiples of that because of the partnership approach we're taking.
Now, just my final question would be in this regard would be, in terms of labor, how many positions have we lost where people have lost their jobs in this period as well? Because it adds to the environment we're in terms of its tension and its need to advocate, because it's there's two sides of the coin here.
Correct. Over the last 4 years, we've lost approximately 400 employees. The majority went out on early retirement incentive program. Unfortunately, when the budget came out, I was forced to make a decision on licensed child care. There was approximately 72, 73 people that were laid off in this current budget crisis for this fiscal year. And so a total, again, I've probably lost 450 to 500 full-time filled positions and probably another 2,000 or 3,000 part-time positions over the last 4 years.
The one thing I did want to ask you on a positive side, of all city departments, how many volunteers do you have approximately?
We have registered volunteers, and I have to point that out as registered because they go the same background check I did, 24,000 volunteers.
And does that include like coaches at sports fields too?
Docents to coaches to in between. And we cannot live without our volunteers. They're a critical component. Mr.
Sanders, Mr. Muckery, Ms. Adams, Mr. Reyes, and I thank you. I just really request that you reach out to other council offices. At some time in the future, I'm going to ask Mr. Garcetti that we have a recreation day item on the council agenda to announce this reorganization, because I think this is very much an important concept that we should know about.
I think, Tom, in that regard, it's not only recreation is paramount, we know all the health reasons for it, but I think there are critical educational elements that come with this. There are critical parenting. There's a whole issue of our social network, our social net, that if it wasn't for the parks, for many areas, there would be no other option. And I think that's critical to highlight as well.
And we agree, and I've offered up our centers to be used for those very same subjects. We know you have to look at rec and parks as an asset. It's there. It's non-threatening. We don't check residency. We don't check citizenship. We provide a service.
Very good. Okay, we'll be in touch. I thank you and your team.
Thank you all.
Mr. Sanders, thank you. We have one public comment card, Jason Elias. You could run the clock, starting right now, Mr. Clerk.
All right, free parking. So just a couple of comments after hearing the department. I certainly appreciate the discussion. Jason Elias, SEIU Local 721, representing Coalition of LA City Unions. We do not necessarily have a problem with the issue of expanding supervision as long as the P3 parking deal goes forward. The concern, as General Manager Muckery correctly points out, is the alternative to the P3 includes $3 million in cuts to the department, which I think would decimate the department. I do want to highlight the fact that the reorganization is estimated at a $658,000 cost for 6 months, $1.3 million annually. And it is a cause for concern. I just wanted to highlight that. But the real issue here is, again, and we agree on quite a bit, General Manager and myself, is the fact that the department has lost general fund support over the past few years, and it's estimated that the department will be on the hook now for over $40 million for the next fiscal year for utilities and everything else. So with general fund costs, general fund support disappearing and having to pay for utilities and everything else, we're left in this predicament. Lastly, partnership. We do work well with the department, but that doesn't mean we agree on everything. We're working together on water efficiency program. We're working together green building retrofit program to, and you both know about those programs. So I'm confident that we can weather this storm together by partnerships.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, this is the end of item 1. So I thank you. Now I'd like to take up item number 8 and ask that each of the representatives of the departments come forth. The representative, if it's Mr. Adams representing you, and if you need to go on your way or whatever you have to do, John, we're okay. Also, with the library department, disability, the zoo, and everyone else who is called. Could you call item number 8?
Item number 8 was continued from the October 26 Arts meeting. This is a motion, Labange Garcetti, relative to directing the Departments of Aging, Department of Recreation and Parks, Disability, Library, Los Angeles Zoo, including Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association, and El Pueblo de Los Angeles, to report with a year-to-date status report and update on budget-related issues, including specific program budget reductions and proposed mitigating measures. This item has also been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Could I start with El Pueblo, the birthplace of Los Angeles? 230 years ago this September, 44 people walked 9 miles from the Mission San Gabriel to the banks of the river, which is our historic birthplace. And Robert, if you all know too, as you make your report, if you know the percent of what your general fund contribution is.
Thank you, Councilman. Robert Andrade, representing El Pueblo. First things first, this is the first year that El Pueblo is no longer receiving any general fund direct subsidy. Our budget is $4.2 million. We raise essentially the $4.2 million to cover approximately $1.8 million for the operations for El Pueblo, and then about a 2.2 to 2.4 million for maintenance, custodial, security, and parking. All those are employees of General Services Department. Our expenditures year to date, we, like our colleagues, incurred a number of cost benefit payouts, layoffs, unbudgeted salary expenditures, where a number of employees were carried on the books until they moved on. However, through the careful managing of our expenditures, we're happy to report that we're in line. Our revenue targets, with the exception of rent, has been good. We're hitting all our targets. As you well know, we've been in negotiations along with the city family, city attorney, et cetera, and other departments in negotiating new rent agreements, and that continues to be a challenge for us.
Very good. How many people visited the Pueblo last year, you think? Estimate.
We estimate over 2 million visitors a year, sir.
2 million. All right, thank you very much. Laura Trejo?
Good morning, Laura Trejo, General Manager, Department of Aging. I'm going to make it short and sweet. We're on budget, we're on target. We're very pleased that we've received additional funds. One of the things I wanted to share with Councilmember Reyes when we were here with you during the budget hearings, one of the things you noted was a letter from UCLA in our ongoing partnership. We have now successfully brought in $1 million grant in partnership with UCLA to establish a community-based aging and research center for low-income seniors in our community. Basically, they will be asking the questions the Department of Aging needs answers for in order to be able to leverage other grant opportunities. One of the things that I'm most pleased about that grant is that it will cover my salary at 15% for the next 3 years. We're trying to be very creative and thinking out of the box in how we meet our budget targets. After this meeting, I'm heading over to LAUSD because we are transitioning all of our adult day programs into evidence-based models, which now the federal government has been putting a lot of resources into from both the Administration on Aging side and CDC as well. And so we're trying to position our community to be at the front of the line when those resources become available. And we're actually going to be utilizing adult ed instructors from LAUSD to help us do the train the trainers and facilitate the activities in the community. So we're actually going to be leveraging a resource that's currently under threat in continuing to disappear in our community. And we're trying to develop a partnership so that we'll kind of make it stronger and less likely that it will disappear and erode in the coming years.
Wonderful. Mr. Chair, can I just say, go Bruins. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Ed, for your suggestion that helped put it together. The collaboration is how we're going to get out of this challenge.
Absolutely.
What percent do you think your budget is general fund?
General fund right now primarily is in administrative supports, and it's overall about 4% of our total
4%.
budget for the Department of
And what's your total budget?
Currently, it's about $38 million, most of that in grants.
Got it.
I mean, she went so fast. There's incredible partnerships and innovative approaches. You're not doing yourself justice, but thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Laura's very dedicated, as is Chris.
Good morning, Chris Morita, Library Department. The library's budget with related costs is $150.7 million. Of that budget, $82 million is for our operating budget. So that's 82 for the operating budget. The remaining 50 is for the indirect costs. Of our 82 million operating budget in 2010-11, 22 million additionally is going to related costs. So 22 million of our 82 million is going to related costs. That includes the employee medical and retirement benefits, utilities, building maintenance, custodial, and security costs. We are halfway through the fiscal year, and our projected deficit has now decreased to $146,000, which we expect to resolve through attrition and belt tightening in our other budgetary accounts. Also, in 2010-11, we sustained a 28% reduction in our workforce, which consisted of losing 324 positions. That resulted in a reduction of service hours from 7 days a week to 5-day-a-week service. To this day, we continue to get complaints from the public regarding the shortened service hours. However, as a mitigating measure, Council members Tom LaBonge and Bernard Parks introduced a motion, which was approved by City Council, to place a ballot measure on the city's March 8, 2011 election to increase the charter appropriation to the Library Department. If Measure L passes, this would help restore 6-day service at all 73 libraries and eventually 7-day service at 9 libraries over a period of 4 years.
What was the percentage of your budget of the total?
I'm sorry?
Percentage of your budget that is consumed?
General fund percent.
General fund.
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, actually, all of our budget, except for maybe 10%, is provided by the the general fund through the charter appropriation.
Right.
So ballpark figure?
89. Okay, yeah. It sounds better than 90. Okay. All right.
Good morning, council members. I'm Denise Ferret from the Zoo Department. The Zoo Department's total direct operating budget is about $17.4 million. About 33% of that is from the general fund, and the balance comes from revenues that we generate at the zoo. We were on target up until December for both attendance and revenue, but the weather created a little hiccup for us. Even though we opened our beautiful Elephants of Asia exhibit, we think it's just a temporary setback. As soon as the weather gets well, we have a large paid advertising campaign that's going to carry us through the end of the fiscal year with some events. So we believe that we will be right on target for both attendance and revenue. We too have struggled, with reductions over the years. We've had 40 positions deleted from the budget over the last 3 years, and we currently have 31 vacancies. But all in all, the employees are doing an incredible job with the very limited resources to provide, the services that are necessary both for the animals and for the visitors. We finished our parking lot project, which will also help us get the attendance back, and so we hope to finish the year on target.
Good. I think all these 4 or 5 questions are very important, and I think it transcend to information for the public which we serve. The amount of, what is the general fund, the amount of involvement, so this is very good. And then the numbers of people, whether it's 2 million, 1.4, whatever it is there. And Ms. Adams.
Regina Adams, Executive Officer for Recreation and Parks. I can tell you the exact numbers of what our budget is. We have about a $182 million budget. Out of that, $141 million comes from our property tax assessment, which is 0.0325%. We also have over $36 million, which we self-generate in revenue. We also have $4 million from the general fund and $100,000 we receive from El Pueblo for doing their landscape maintenance. Out of the $4 million that we received from the general fund this year, that was for 2 specific purposes. $2 million was for us to continue to provide the landscape maintenance at the city public buildings, which includes police stations, fire stations, libraries, etc. And the other $2 million was for us to continue the Class Parks program, which we were thinking that we were going to have to reduce. The Class Parks program is specifically aimed at risk children, specifically teenagers, and it stands for clean and safe spaces. However, we were just informed this week that now with the current financial situation for the city that we may be losing $2.8 million of that $4 million. And of course, we're already halfway through the fiscal year, which means we've also expended some of those funds. Yesterday, I reported to the Budget and Finance Committee that if that $2.8 million of the $4 million that we received from the general fund is taken back, then we will no longer be able to do the landscaping for those other public facilities. That will immediately cease and desist. And also, too, for our...
There's a question on that. Whose determination is that? If the city gives you the money to perform that service, whose determination is that?
Per the charter, that we cannot use our funds for any other purpose beyond recreational purposes. So for us to do the maintenance for the landscaping and so forth for other facilities is not part of our core function. Our core function is to maintain our own facilities, our own parks. So in the
But
past,
wasn't there a
we had
reconsolidation when Mr. Muckery, or prior to Mr. Muckery, Mr. Bacon had general services where they tried to shepherd this into your department and tried to look at that? I would want to look at that real closely. And also, is this the charter calls not necessarily, is it correct? I just got to, because I've heard it both ways. The property tax allocation, or is it general fund allocation?
In the past, we had received, as Mr. Muckery has stated, we had received, millions of dollars from the general fund, and that's why we were able to do that. But in the past few years, when we no longer now are receiving those general funds, the city attorney has opined that our funds, which is from the property tax assessments as well as for our revenue, it's only supposed to be used for recreational purposes. And so we brought that to the council and the mayor's attention 2 years ago, that when we were started to being moved away from receiving general funds, that this was going to be an issue for the city as far as for the landscape maintenance for other city facilities.
This is the first time I've heard that, though.
Well, we've been saying it for quite a while now.
I know, but I got good hearing, Regina. So
Yeah.
so that's why we had these
know what
committees.
happened.
John, you want to add something on that? Because I think, do you remember that Randall Bacon, John Muckery reconsolidation?
Yes. What Regina's saying is 100% true. The charter provides a property tax valuation to libraries and rec and parks. It also provides provision that, or other appropriate general fund money, the council can't approve that. They've taken away the general fund appropriation except for $4 million, and they've actually taken all subsidies away from us. So our indirect costs, just like the libraries,
for labor, for utilities, for now trash pickup, is all being charged against our property tax valuation and our own revenues. And that's where the biggest hit to our budget is now, that I think it was a faulty interpretation of the charter. I have to be honest with you.
Okay, so we could discuss that. I think this has been a very good, Mr. Reyes, any questions?
I think we should understand that point you just made, Mr. Muckree. If we can get at least a perspective of that interpretation, if there is disagreement, then what are the other perspectives, so that we can grasp the nuances of that interpretation? Because I agree with you, there's different perspectives depending on how we want to posture ourselves legally as we go through that process. But at least give us the benefit of the doubt of understanding those perspectives. I think would take us a long way.
So what we're going to do, what we're going to ask for is, we're going to send a directive to all of you, and thank you. And we're going to just have a sample of similar to the questions that you all asked, so we can put in some block form and look at it. And I'm going to just, out of that, if it's 2011, let's go back to 2001. July 1st, 2001. The world was different before that, but as a record of see where you were there. And I don't know if you have that, or we'll work with the CAO's office, CLA's office, to find that historic data, and as far as the number of people. I don't know what the peak was. John, maybe you could help me on this with your experience. Should I say go back 10 years or go back 5 years? For a model of change. Like right now, if the number of employees you had in 2005 was here, and now you're down here, I want to give the public some comparison. Yeah.
I think a 10-year run.
10-year. Okay, very good. All righty, so that's good there. Any other questions, Mr. Reyes? We do have one public comment card from Ms. Watkins. I don't know if she's in the room, so she filled it out. Ms. Watkins, if you want to come up, please. And this is general comment. Let me just ask another question before we finish. You'll all get that memo from committee on that. Ms. Watkins, thank you.
Good morning. I've made time this morning to come to ask the question. In regards to the contract that's supposedly signed with DCA and LACMA, did that contract go through this body or through council, or will it go through this body or council to be finally approved?
Concerning
the preservation of the Watts Towers.
Okay, there has been nothing in this committee at this time, is that
No.
correct? So I would believe it would go through this committee in some future time.
So, because I don't understand the process, and so I've come this morning because I've been coming all summer, all fall, in order for DCA to begin to divulge information so that she's not compromising my community, or our process has been going on for 20 years for the city to do right by us. So I'm here today, and I know it's not on the agenda, to say again to this body that it needs to address it, because the Watts Towers is a National Historic Landmark, and it needs to be treated as such. So I don't mind coming, but I'm getting to a point where this body needs to take a look at what DCA is doing, because if they're out to lunch, we need to know that.
Well, okay, here's the situation. If you have your phone number here, I'll inquire, and I have your
It's
phone
there.
number, I got it.
And I'll go to council if I need to, and we're preparing documents, but I just need to know whether or not that particular piece is going before this body, because it's being announced in the New York Times and the LA Times 2 and 3 times, but I don't know if that's the proper procedure prior to a final
And do you work with the
finalization.
councilwoman of the district?
I've talked to her.
Okay, we'll
I'm
talk
dealing
to
with the
her.
skateboard park now, so I will
Okay, so I'll talk to you
mention
too.
her again.
Thank
Yeah.
you for your very good
Thank you.
comments. Say hello to your husband. Okay, there's no items before us anymore. I want to thank Richard Williams, our city clerk, our Lita Brimsley. I want to thank you, our city attorney, and Ms. Gavin, Andrea from the CLA's office. This is the first committee. We're going to continue to engage. Mr. Reyes and Mr. Wesson and I are strong proponents of all what you do, and we have to join in collaboration to try to get through the challenging times that we're living in. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.